Our next film is named Slacker, and this is a sleeper that I enjoyed. It's a strange, fascinating, experimental film that takes place in and around the world of off-campus life in Austin, Texas. The method of the movie is to start with one character, follow him until he runs into somebody else, then follow the next character until he runs into somebody else, and so on, until eventually we've met dozens of different people. Instead of a story that goes from A to Z, this movie is constructed more like a pinball game that ricochets wildly from one person to the next.
You seen Gary around? No. Does he still live in the same place?
I told you, no one's seen him for months.
Well, later.
What was that obsessiveness line again?
Obsessiveness without personality.
What are you talking about?
Excuse me. Say, pal, did I overhear you say you got a friend that's missing?
Well, I thought he's missing. He's just not around.
Oh, yeah, well, I've been reading in the World Weekly News, you know, just a little while ago. There was a guy out here on the street. He's found wandering around, didn't know who he was, didn't know where he came from, anything like that. Oh, he's perfectly healthy, but he's complete amnesiac, you know. A lot of people like that found just wandering around lately.
Everyone in this film seems to be consumed by a personal obsession, including this character, who claims to have the results of one of Madonna's medical tests.
I know it's kind of cloudy, but it's a Madonna pap smear. It's got...
I know of only one other movie in film history that uses this same anti-narrative approach, and that would be Louis Buñuel's 1974 masterpiece, The Phantom of Liberty. What both films do is remind us that although stories may have a beginning, a middle, and an end, the universe may not. It may be more accurately reflected as a series of coincidences, accidents, and chain reactions. Apart from that, I enjoyed Slacker simply because of the weird and eccentric people it contains, most of them non-stop talkers with bizarre theories. This movie is as close as you can get to the experience of listening in on every conversation in the off-campus neo-beatnik coffee shop all at once.
Except that I think that if you listen into the average coffee shop, I think you might find people that were more unintentionally funny and maybe some that were more interesting. I didn't think that the collection of people that he found were that interesting, and that's my problem with the picture. I certainly, after seeing so many boring movies, forget going from A to Z. Most movies we see go from A to B. I mean, and so the spirit of the enterprise I appreciate tremendously. In fact, my favorite scene in the whole picture is the last scene. It's probably your favorite, too, if you love movies, where the camera is, we'll put it this way, is in flight itself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what the spirit of this movie is contained in that last sequence where a camera's being waved around and passed around. But the people, I just, you know, I got a little, they were grating on me.
I thought a lot of the people were very funny. I, for example, very much like that sequence where the guy breaks in as a burglar and then is talked out of his crime by the guy he's going to rob, who then takes him on a walk and explains to him the strange things that are happening.
I don't know how...
I like stuff like that. I think the film goes on a little too long, to tell you the truth.
It wouldn't have gone on...
And that would be my criticism of it. But on the other hand, I think that it was very interesting just to watch it as it was going along.
I'll tell you, I enjoyed your review. Seriously, I enjoyed your review more than I enjoyed the picture. Okay.
When we come back, some Texas teenagers live through the long last night of the school year. Dazed and Confused is next. After the Led Zeppelin song, and it's sort of an updating of American Graffiti for the 1970s, remembering a high school generation that sometimes did indeed feel dazed and confused by an American society post-Vietnam that no longer seemed, as it did in the 1950s and early 60s, perfect for teenagers. The movie ambles through one long day and night, the last day of school, in a small Texas town where kids like this one, played by Matthew McConaughey, graduated years ago and are still aimlessly hanging around.
There's a new fiesta in the making as we speak. It's out at the Moon Tower. Full kegs. Everybody's gonna be there. You ought to go.
With a long summer stretching before them, the kids drink beer and smoke pot and trade deep but elusive truths, which are perfectly heard in the dialogue by Richard Linklater, who also directed the film.
Absolutely, George Tote Weed. Are you kidding me, man? He grew fields of that stuff, man. That's what I'm talking about. Fields.
He grew that up in Mount Vernon, man.
Mount Vernon, man, he grew it all over the country, man. He had people growing it all over the country, you know? The whole country back then was getting hot. Let me tell you, man, because he knew. He was on to something, man. He knew that it would be a good cash crop for the southern states, man.
Like all teenagers everywhere, they have legends from out of the past, also about teenagers.
This place used to be off limits, man, because some drunk freshman fell off. He went right down the middle, smacking his head on every beam, man. I hear it doesn't hurt after the first couple, though. Autopsy said he had one beer, man. How many did you have?
Dazed and Confused is the second feature by Richard Linklater, who also made a very interesting movie 2 years ago named Slacker, a cross-section of off-campus life in Austin, Texas. This new film is so well written and acted, it's almost like anthropology. It knows exactly how high school kids of 15 or 20 years ago talked, dressed, thought, and behaved. There's no big plot to get in the way, because what the movie wants to do is suggest the kind of world they're entering, and the sometimes dazed, sometimes confused, sometimes hopeful, and sometimes promising people that they are.
I like the film on that basis, too. It took me a while, though, to get into this picture. At first, I was thinking, you know, this is really disgusting behavior. A lot of the rites of getting into sororities and fraternities and all that stuff.
All the seniors have to paddle the juniors.
It was very cruel, and I didn't understand where the film's attitude toward it. And he doesn't declare his attitude very clearly, I think, until later on, where we do see that these kids are inheriting rights that were not of their making. They really are dazed. They think they're supposed to go through with this.
Yeah.
And it did seem very sad. Their lives seemed very, very sad. And when I felt that in the picture, I felt it did have some humanity in it and heart in it. And then I got into the picture and enjoyed it.
Now, you know, of course, that high school fraternities do things like this.
Yes, I know they do. And it's awful. And they're doing it, they're acting out some very old, unappealing attitudes.
Yes, they are, and they don't really have any myths of their own. I mean, if you go back to American Graffiti, those kids had their cars, they had rock and roll, which was terrific. They had the blonde at the end of the block. They had the drive-in.
Well, it was upbeat.
They had, they had the future. They were and then, of course, after American Graffiti came Vietnam, and then after Vietnam came Dazed and Confused, and I think that's how you get the balance here.
It's a good film. With the artistic failure and box office disappointment of the recent release of Reality Bites, Hollywood's conventional wisdom is that today's moviegoers might not be interested in recent generations of disaffected young people. But last year, there was a very good film about the growing pains of teenagers in the late 70s. It's called Dazed and Confused, and it's just now being released on home video, a film very sharp about the pointless, disillusioning rituals that a lot of kids were then put through, including high school kids hazing the incoming freshmen. Also running through this smartly written picture is a general dissatisfaction with the culture of the day of the late 70s, which led to a lot of kids listening to the official noise of protest, heavy metal music.
Maybe the 80s will be radical. You know, I figure we'll be in our 20s, and hey, it can't get any worse.
Dazed and Confused was written and directed by Richard Linklater, who has a fine ear for the dialogue of that time. He's also cast this picture very well with such actors as Jason London, Michelle Burke, and Rory Cochrane. Dazed and Confused is my video pick of the week. My video pick of the week is one of the best romances of the year so far, Before Sunrise. It never really caught on with a lot of the public. It didn't have big stars or a big advertising campaign behind it, but it was charming and truly romantic, telling the story of two college-age students who meet on a train in Europe, and in one of the great pickup scenes in movie history, Ethan Hawke takes a risk and approaches Julie Delpy just before his scheduled stop in Vienna.
You start to think about all those guys you've met in your life and what might have happened if you picked up with one of them, right? Well, I'm one of those guys. That's me.
The two spend an enchanted day and night together, mostly just walking and talking, in a beautifully written script by director Richard Linklater.
You know, I've been wondering lately, do you know anyone who's in a happy relationship?
Yeah, sure. You know, I know happy couples. But I think they lie to each other.
Before Sunrise, our video pick of the week. And get the heck out of town. Okay. All right, next movie. And our next movie is called Suburbia, and it's a tough and funny slice of life set among the world of young adults who have nothing to do but hang around a local suburban convenience store and act like they're still in high school. Their main attitude is that they're unfulfilled and teed off at the world, and they get a jolt when one of their old classmates comes back to town, and he's become a minor rock star, complete with limousine and cute publicist in tow.
No, she works for the record company and takes care of interviews, and, you know, we were actually just doing an interview. And Erica said she'd like to see Burnfield, so...
That's Jace Bartok as the rock star, and Parker Posey is the publicist who is drawn to the local Air Force dropout, played by Nikki Katt.
I think I'm rich and you hate me.
Now, how the hell would you know what I think? You don't know me.
I'd like to.
The presence of the rock star also manages to drive a wedge between two other hangers-on.
You know, I mean, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does that make a sound?
Of course it does.
You know, that is my worst fear. Making a sound and no one hears it.
Mine too.
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure, you make art and you want people to see it.
Wait, what happened to the tree? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that your tree is not artistic if no one cuts it down.
Jeff likes to argue for the sake of arguing.
No, I don't.
Yeah. And self-hating violence is in the air, too, in this portrait of hostile, empty lives as the Air Force dropout plans to get even with the Pakistani owner of the convenience store over a previous argument.
You don't think that after they called the cops on me, her and Mohammed had a nice laugh?
No.
No?
Well, I disagree.
Suburbia was directed by Richard Linklater, who made Slacker, Dazed and Confused, and Before Sunrise, and he has a very good sense of his own generation, how and what they talk about. Certainly the subject matter of knocking the suburbs is not new, but the movie Suburbia works because of Linklater's direction and the script, the tough script by Eric Bogosian, so dead on that the film plays like an all-night howl of despair. I do recommend Suburbia.
So do I, and I love Bogosian's script touches, such as the speeches the Pakistani store owner has, where he predicts what's going to happen to him in 2 years and what's going to happen to them in 2 years.
That's a real powerful put-down.
That's devastating. And the performances are all good. Most of the actors are fairly unfamiliar. Parker Posey is turning up a lot these days.
In independent films.
She's beginning to grow on me. I liked her in this film. But they work together so that even though you realize at some point this began in life as a stage play, nevertheless, it does seem like a real corner where these guys really do hang out.
You know, I want to comment on that. If I hadn't seen Bogosian's credit at the in the film, I would not necessarily have known it began as a stage play. It feels real, and that's where the director comes in, and maybe Bogosian made some alterations. I never saw the play. But, you know, that's rarely happening, to see a play transformed to film and be this natural. It's a real good work.
It's a real good film. During the Roaring '20s, the Newton Gang ran the most successful bank robbery operation in American history, up until the savings and loan frauds of the 1980s, of course, and they were proud to say they did it without killing anyone. The Newton Boys has a cast full of talented names, but it never seems to go anywhere with them. A lot of the scenes have the same tone as this one, laid back, conversational, curiously muted.
None of those are traceable. I suppose I could give you 70 cents on the dollar.
90.
80. And I promise never to tell anybody where they came from.
80 would be good.
85 would be better. We promise never to rob your little bank.
That's Matthew McConaughey as Willis Newton and Dwight Yoakam as a member of the gang who's not a brother but does know how to blow up safes with nitroglycerin.
You only get to make one mistake with this. Then they walk around the edge of the crater. If they find a finger or a toe, well, that's what they bury.
Two other Newton boys are played here by Vincent D'Onofrio and Ethan Hawke.
But they finally let you out? What left? Well, hell, I escaped.
And here's the youngest, Skeet Ulrich, who expresses some of their moral concerns.
Banks have been dealing dirt to our people since before we was born, little brother, and it's time we dealt some back.
Farmers got their money in them banks.
Insurance companies. See, all the banks is insured now. And that's who takes the loss, and hell, they're the biggest crooks of them all. We are just little thieves stealing from the big thieves.
Juliana Margulies plays McConaughey's girlfriend who worries about the dangerous profession of the man she loves.
You have to promise me this was the last bank robbery.
Damn right it was the last bank robbery. From now on, it's the whole business, and that's it.
The Newton Boys was directed by Richard Linklater, a talented director whose Dazed and Confused and Before Sunrise told contemporary stories. This first period film by him obviously takes Bonnie and Clyde as his inspiration and has the same mix of bluegrass music and getaway cars, but the movie is a pale shadow of that classic and another similar film, The Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid. He doesn't do a very good job of making the characters stand out from each other as individuals, and the meandering pace is a problem. The movie's most entertaining footage is at the end, where we see video of Johnny Carson interviewing one of the real Newton boys.
That is worth sticking around
Yes, it
for.
is.
And I enjoyed the film more than you did. No, it is not as good as Bonnie and Clyde. Of course, you and I are not going to see a film this year as good as Bonnie and Clyde.
Probably not, no.
And you're right to recommend the Great Northfield, Minnesota Parade, one of my favorite contemporary sort of dirty westerns. I like that film very much. But I did get involved here because of the spirit of a group. You're right, it doesn't break out the individual characters that much, but I liked the group enterprise, and I liked being taken through this classic American myth, which is, of course, that we're robbing from the robbers. We're not robbing from the people.
Yeah, in other words, the insurance companies are going to pay for it anyway. The banks lie about how much was stolen.
Exactly.
That's all good, but I just felt the energy level and the dramatic interest could have been pumped up.
I thought the energy, I mean, I didn't want it to have more action in a way. I liked the quieter moments there. I enjoyed the picture marginally.
Continuing our survey of the best films of 2001, the number 6 film on my list is Waking Life, a significant breakthrough in animation that also happens to be enormously entertaining and thought-provoking. Richard Linklater's hero embarks on a dream journey through Austin, Texas that takes him from one guru or deep thinker to another, some of them self-appointed, all of them pontificating on the meaning of life.
I'm afraid we're losing the real virtues of living life passionately, the sense of taking responsibility for who you are, the ability to make something of yourself, and feeling good about life.
Most feature-length animated films are very expensive. Waking Life wasn't, because of a software breakthrough that allowed Linklater's team to animate it on ordinary desktop Macintoshes. What it means is that the theatrical animation market has now been opened up for independent filmmakers. This was the year's most important technical milestone.
It may not have cost a lot of money, but it looks rich and lush.
Yes.
And I mean, if you told me that it was one of the most expensive animated films ever made, I'd believe that. But more to the point, it's entertaining.
Yes.
The writing is good, and the acting, which really becomes almost voiceover work because these people have been painted over, is really strong. So I didn't quite have this on my top 10 list, but it was really close to making it.
Well, you know, I loved it too as a movie, and that's important to the people who are going to go see it because they don't really care about the technical breakthrough, but I think it will mean more range in animated films in the years to come.
And I hope it finds a bigger audience. I'm sure it'll get nominated in the new animated category for the Academy Award, and I hope people check this out on DVD and video.
Yeah! You get stranger every year. Clear! Where's Lamp? We broke up. Tell me what happened. Oh, I get stranger every year. You know who's out here? Who? Amy.
You still feel bad about Amy Randall?
Our next movie is a great big ball of entertainment. It's called The School of Rock. Jack Black is a bar band guitarist named Dewey who masquerades as a substitute teacher to earn some much-needed cash. For 3 weeks, neither parents nor administration figure out that Dewey is prepping the kids to enter a Battle of the Bands competition. Nobody at the school so much as checks Dewey for ID. He's left alone to turn the classroom into a working studio.
Now give me an E chord. Just go. But let me hear. Yeah, now raise your goblet of rock. It's a toast to those who rock.
Jack Black has a weird, sweaty charisma that's part John Belushi, part Jack Nicholson, and much original talent. There's a ton of great energy, but we rarely even touch down in any credible situation. I did like the good, solid music, some big laughs, and a heartwarming, if predictable, conclusion, so thumbs up.
I really love this movie, and I really liked Jack Black's performance. The nice thing about the movie is it doesn't condescend to the kids, and it isn't just a sitcom story, and we get the feeling that Black, as the substitute teacher, really loves rock and roll and really knows his subject and really knows music, and it's nice that all these kids are also musicians, and so there's a lot of stuff in this movie where they're really talking about music. It feels like it's really happening. It didn't feel like it was simply manufactured as some dumb teenage movie.
Well, the stuff in the classroom feels like it's really happening. All the stuff around it feels like contrived sitcom stuff. Joan Cusack, who I love, is playing a real caricature of a personality, and the parents are idiots.
Wait a minute about Joan Cusack, because what I liked about her was that she didn't play the usual stereotyped harridan of a teacher, but in fact is a complicated person who does like rock and roll and turns out to be sort of nice.
Well, she has a sip of beer and she does a Stevie Nicks impersonation.
Well, why not?
You know?
That's a great scene.
But that kind of stuff plays to me more like sitcom stuff. I did love the stuff with Jack Black and the kids, and it is a real love letter to pure rock and roll.
It's fun.
Okay, our next movie is Before Sunset, a sequel to the 1995 film in which a young American man and a young French woman meet in Vienna and spend a long night talking about the meaning of life while they're falling a little bit in love. Played by Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, they promise to meet again a year later, but now 9 years have passed. He's written a bestseller about their one night together, and she materializes at a book signing in Paris so that their conversation begins again.
Do I look any different? I do.
I'd have to see you naked.
What?
I know, I'm sorry.
In a rush of words, both cautious and risky, they wonder if perhaps that night in Vienna was a sign that they really were meant for one another.
In the months leading up to my wedding, okay, I was thinking about you all the time. I mean, even on my way there, I'm in the car, and a buddy of mine is driving me downtown, and I'm staring out the window, and I think I see you.
Before Sunset takes place almost literally in real time. There are no breaks between the beginning of the movie and the end in terms of the continuity. Like My Dinner with Andre, it's basically one long conversation, an exhilarating, stimulating, thoughtful conversation. Director Richard Linklater co-wrote the movie with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and the screenplay is literate, realistic, thoughtful, and subtle in the way the characters circle one another, trying to figure out what they're really up to. This is a better movie than Before Sunrise. It's more urgent, smarter, wiser about life, and you could say the same thing about the characters. They're a little older now. Thumbs up.
I agree. I think it is a better movie because the characters are more interesting, and Hawke and Delpy each contributed quite a bit to the screenplay, and it's beautiful writing, wonderful acting, and you're so right about Linklater's direction. At first you're thinking, okay, this is just a dialogue movie. They're talking, but you realize you're seeing a lot of Paris in this film as they walk and they get on that boat and they get to her apartment, and the camera moves around with such grace and style and subtlety where it doesn't take you away from what they're saying and yet keeps you involved with what's happening on the screen. So really, top-notch work here.
You know, this movie probably would have been impossible without actors who were very, very smart and natural, very literate and very natural. This is very, very good acting, even though it seems to be just two people having a conversation.
Yeah, in lesser hands, it would have been maybe a disaster. And I love sequels like this and Barbarian Invasions that catch up with characters 10 or 15 years down the line. I'd like to see these guys 10 years from now.
I was going to say that I keep doing this every 10 years, like the 7 Up series.
That'd be wonderful.
Aren't you supposed to be in left field?
Billy Bob Thornton takes over the Walter Matthau role in that scene from Bad News Bears. It opens this weekend. It gets 2 thumbs up for us. This movie is rated PG-13, so it's not for little kids, even though it's about young kids.
Yeah, but it actually is in the tradition of the first movie.
Yeah, it is.
And Billy Bob has pointed out that some of the stuff in the first movie they couldn't put in this movie, so the first movie was really ahead of its time.
Yeah, and I think it's just about as good, you know? I mean, there's some good laughs here. Richard Linklater's a good director, so it's definitely worth checking out.
I've gotten to the point where I really just kind of like Billy Bob Thornton almost every time.
Yeah, you're right about that. Okay, and Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder in A Scanner Darkly. It got 2 thumbs up from Roger and me. Okay, now, next movie. Some of the ingredients in Fast Food Nation are quite flavorful. You have a sharp director in Richard Linklater, a terrific cast, including Bruce Willis, Greg Kinnear, Wilmer Valderrama, Ethan Hawke, and Catalina Sandino Moreno. We get some hilarious satire and some gruesomely effective scenes. This is a distractingly cheap-looking docudrama based on the best-selling non-fiction book about the fast food industry. Love that book. Kinnear plays Don Anderson, marketing exec for a burger chain known as Mickey's.
And the fecal coliform counts were just off the charts. I'm concerned that this could be a problem for us. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Not exactly.
I'm saying there's in the meat.
And that would be your first indication you might not want to grab a burger after this movie. Valderrama plays a Mexican illegal who gets a job at the Colorado plant where they make all those tasty Mickey's burgers.
A una manguera de presión y yo pues riegue agua para limpiar la sangre, la grasa, el pelo y toda la mierda que queda de las vacas.
Guacala.
Linklater does have a lot to say about border crossings, our treatment of undocumented workers and slaughterhouses and predatory bosses, and idealistic college students and sellout executives, and even more. Watching Fast Food Nation is like trying to eat a 4-foot-tall burger. To me, at least, there were just too many ingredients, so thumbs down.
Well, I like this movie. I give it a thumbs up.
Okay.
I see your points. I mean, there is a lot. This is a movie that's trying to be about even more than just, you know, fast food restaurants and the food chain, but about sort of American culture and society and where we're all at. And I really liked Wilmer Valderrama and also Catalina Sandino Moreno, who plays his wife. The slaughterhouse scenes were very powerful. I loved Avril Lavigne as the young.
Well, I love that scene where these college students are like, you know, let's free the cows from this place, and they learn firsthand that, you know, cows are kind of stupid. I mean, what would cows do when you free them?
I like that whole plot too, because it really showed this sort of the idealism and political consciousness being raised, and And, you know, sort of, but where do you go? How do you take action? It's a kind of a loose, messy, baggy movie in the way that a lot of Richard Linklater's movies are. I mean, he makes his best movies about
well, his movies,
people
of
talking.
course, do. I mean, they meander all over the place. But in this case, Tony, I just felt like he had so many really good, strong storylines. We have too many plot threads that I think if they had just gotten rid of those, given us a little more meat, so to speak, with the main storylines, this could have been a great film. So for me, it was very frustrating.
I actually like that structural aspect of it, just the way that you kind of had to find your way.
I just like that whole slaughterhouse thing where we got to see step by step how cows become burgers.
Well, many animals were harmed in the making of this film.
I would say so.
You'll call my mother, you'll tell her that I'm an important part of the show and that it's necessary that I miss some school. Of course.
I'm Richard Roeper, and coming up next, Jack Black and Shirley MacLaine are buddies for life, even after one of them is dead. It's my review of Bernie right now. Jack Black does maybe the best work in his career in Bernie. This is a brilliant and low-key dark comedy from his School of Rock director, Richard Linklater. Based on a true and bizarre story from the 1990s, this is a bleep-kicker version of Fargo. And while not quite in the same league as that classic, this is one of the best films of the year so far.
He was about the most popular man in Carthage. Real people person. Just made you feel real good about yourself.
It's like he had cast a spell over the entire area.
Black is the title character. He's a portly, flamboyant assistant funeral director in the small town of Carthage in East Texas. Now, throughout this movie, we see interviews with the actual locals from Carthage talking about the real events involving Bernie and Marjorie. She's a mean-spirited, wealthy old widow played to perfection by Shirley MacLaine.
All I want is for you to be a man for once in your life.
So in a way, Bernie is about 40% documentary, 60% Black and MacLaine acting out the stories, and it's 100% effective. Bernie clearly enjoys his world, whether he's going above and beyond in his work duties or partaking in local theater or befriending the local widows. But with Marjorie, who's estranged from her entire family, there's also the big money factor, and Bernie loves spending her money, even as he grows ever more resentful of the way she treats him.
Your number comes up. Danny Buck's coming to get you first.
Linklater favorite Matthew McConaughey is outstanding as the grandstanding DA who thinks he's the only one who can see through Bernie. But there's no real great mystery here. No question about what happens to Marjorie. The amazing thing is how the town reacts and how we can understand why they would react that way. It's rare that a movie about a real-life murder could be called breezy and whimsical, but Bernie pulls it off. I love this movie. I give it an A. Once in a great while, I see a movie I know I'll be listing as one of my all-time favorites for the rest of my days. So it is with Richard Linklater's Boyhood, one of the most remarkable movie-going experiences I've ever had. This is a film of elegant simplicity. Shot in 39 days over the course of 12 years with the same cast, Boyhood is a living time capsule so pitch perfect, the experience of watching it is almost unsettling. It's about the small moments from childhood you never forget, the major events that shape your future, and all that's in between. Linklater gathered his cast together for a week or so at a time between 2002 and 2013. A local Texas kid named L.R. Coltrane plays Mason, who goes from a typical 7-year-old moppet to a sensitive, brooding, good-hearted college freshman. Linklater's own daughter, Lorelai, also grows up before our very eyes, playing Mason's older sister, Samantha. Boyhood is also the story of motherhood. Patricia Arquette does nomination-worthy work as a single mother whose fierce love for her children doesn't prevent her from making a number of mistakes, especially when it comes to men. And Linklater regular Ethan Hawke does some of his best work as Mason Sr., who starts off as the cliched absentee dad with a muscle car, but evolves into something quite surprising. There are no title cards or dramatic moments announcing the passing of the years. Mason and Lorelai just get a little bit older, and the music and the technology changes, and suddenly we realize one adult character is now out of the picture completely, while a former fringe character has become an important figure in the lives of these children, at least for a while. It feels like real life. 1 minute Mason is a carefree kid dressed as Harry Potter waiting in line for the latest book. Next thing you know, his voice is dropped and he's wearing an earring and nail polish and questioning why everyone his age is a slave to Facebook. There are so many things that could have gone wrong with this project when you really think about it. What if young Coltrane grew up to be a terrible actor in his teens? What if Lorelai decided 5 years ago she didn't want to be in Dad's movie anymore? Fortunately for Linklater and for us, it all came together beautifully.
Boyhood is a unique and special film. It's the best movie of 2014 so far. You owe it to yourself to see it. I give it my highest grade. That's an A+.